Hello again. If you do have a mobile, if you would like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, huge welcome back to Janine Griffiths from online news site Akashic Times with Media and the Mind, mass hypnosis and conditioning through words of mass deception. Janine highlights the media's use of psychology to help in forming our opinions for us. Although some would argue that mainstream news and newspapers in particular are losing some popularity, one must remember the sheer volume and regularity that forms our daily avalanche of news via familiar, credible, respectable faces and organisations of perceived authority and reliability. This, Janine points out, is brainwashing that has worked for decades and now refined. Also up for discussion, social media, connecting us while data trawling everything. Please welcome Janine Griffiths.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming, and thank you to Rob for that wonderful introduction. I'm a journalist. I used to work in the mainstream news, and I went into mainstream journalism with a little bit of naivety. I thought, I can change things. I recognised even from a young age that actually the things that I read in the news weren't always right, but I was naive enough to think, I can go in there and, once you become part of that system, once you work for a local news, then you can change it from the inside. And because that's what we're taught, isn't it, from a young age, that actually if you want to change something, what you have to do is you have to join it, and then you can, affect an organisation from the inside. It was only after joining the regional news and becoming a reporter, which had been a lifelong dream of mine. I mean, I'd always dreamed of, being one of those news reporters and uncovering the stories that are really going to make a difference to the world, only to realise that I was completely censored in the type of things that I could report and the type of things that I could say. And it was only after I'd been working for a few newspapers that I started to notice a little bit of a pattern. I couldn't upset certain people. If I tried to, expose certain things that I heard was going on, or even tried to research or look into it, I would be stopped, particularly if it involved, high-profile figures like the mayor and people like that. But I just couldn't understand why there didn't seem to be that much competition between, sort of different news outlets. Why is it that if I tried to pitch my story elsewhere, that I would get more or less the same response? So this set me off on a little bit of a journey. And I discovered that, like anything else, the media is a system. And as with any system, unless you understand how it works, unless you understand the mechanics of it, you are not going to come in, even not as one reporter or a few reporters, and dramatically change the way the news operates. It's been designed in a very specific way, with a lot of different organisations, each having their stake in the mainstream media. And tonight I'm going to talk about who some of those organisations are, who funds the media, and why you can never really trust what you read. But actually, I think we're going into very interesting times, because we don't just have the TV, the local news and, the traditional BBC, as we've had for many years. We've also got social media and the tech giants that are also claiming their stake in controlling everything that we see and everything that we read. And what I'm noticing nowadays is the clamp, or should I say the noose, is getting tighter and tighter. There's a real war on fake, I have to say this with a straight face, there's a war on fake news at the moment, or what is going to be defined as fake news. And already we're hearing from high profile politicians that, conspiracy news sites and things that are not part of the mainstream are considered fake news. So this is the way that it's going, and tonight I hope to shed a bit of a light on why that is, and most importantly, what can we do to sort of overcome that and to, take ourselves in a different direction. So yeah, this is all these problems that I was experiencing with the news, that I was trying to assert myself as a reporter and could never quite do it. I was getting, I had to answer to not just, friends and family, but I also had to answer to people that I tried to, interact with, local people, where I said, I'll expose this is what's going on. I'll expose some of the problems that you're facing with the police, or, with local politicians just not listening to you, and having to go back to those people and explain why there's no story coming out. It was embarrassing, and it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I have to take things into my own hands. So the Akashic Times was born. I started it in 2012. It's been going strong for about 6 years now, and it's completely impartial. I don't get any profits from it. I don't have any advertising. There's nobody pulling the strings. It's just me, a one-man band, or should I say a one-woman band if you want to be politically correct. And it's been that way, and it will stay that way, because I know that I've got the freedom to talk about the issues that I just couldn't break through in the mainstream. So it's a new site that I run in my spare time for that reason, because it doesn't have any kind of profits or anything associated with it. It means that it's still very much in the background, as I do my mainstream job now. My background, it covers local newspapers. I've also worked for agencies and online websites. But this is part of the independent media, and we're seeing a lot of independent media, not just the Akashic Times, radio sites, websites, all dedicated to try and bringing in a little bit more independence. And this is something that I think is becoming more and more under threat. So first I want to start off by talking a little bit about the media and the mind. I think most of the people sitting in this room are already aware of the mass deception that is going on. We already know that the people that are trying to control the media are, their aim is to deceive us into complying with the status quo. But I would actually argue it's not just about compliance. It's about power. And the real source of power is energy. That is ultimately what they're after. If they can control our energy, then they really control the world. And that's something that we can take control of, but it's about knowing how. And it starts by asking questions. Our minds and bodies are the most powerful source of energy that we have. That's why they keep us working for such long hours. That's why they keep us distracted and divided, because if we were to channel that energy into something more positive or something alternative, then the system would crumble. And they know it. So the media plays a very important role in getting us to channel our energy into the direction that they want us to go, and into, thinking, controlling our thoughts, the way we think, because if they can control the way we think, then they've got us, basically. It's not so much about just controlling people's actions. It's really what is behind those actions, because if you're asking questions and if you're not taking in the information that you're fed on a daily basis, you become very dangerous. I think this next slide encapsulates exactly what the media is like. They would want us to believe that the powers that be, and when I say the powers that be, I'm not just talking about the governments of the world, I'm talking about secret societies, the authorities that we have to deal with on a daily basis. These people are really predators. But if you read and believe what you see in the media, you'd think that these people are trying to protect us, that they have our best interests at heart. And this is really how the media reports the news. Makes no sense, has no logic to it whatsoever, but if you repeat a lie long enough, then you start to believe it. This is a question that I often get asked a lot, usually by friends and family who still think I'm a little bit kooky for having this website which they see as conspiracy and a bit out there and a bit illogical. They're like, well, what is your problem with the media? They say, you're a journalist, you used to work for the media, so why is it that you, of all people, do not trust the media? And again, this is what this presentation is about today. So I often give them a few statistics just to make them think, just to make them start asking questions. I say to them, why is it that 90% of everything that we either watch, read and hear, however you're taking in that information, why is it that it's just owned by a handful of companies? Does it make sense that of all the thousands and thousands of magazines and websites that are out there, about 6 or 7 big giants control all of that, and half of these are faceless. I mean, I go through the names of some of these today, but some of them are unknown. Some of these are just companies that we may not even have heard of. And is it right that all the information that we're consuming, not just in this country, you know, when I talk about the media, I'm really making reference to the global media, like media outlets in, Africa, across Asia. You know, I've been traveling a lot and I see the same patterns developing in the news that they're taking in. And so from the previous diagram, what you can see is that the major TV and newspaper networks are owned by companies like Disney. Now, I always wondered, what is a children's entertainment program owning half of the news? I mean, they own thousands of magazines, websites, and newspapers across the world, not just in the UK, in the US rather. But then I looked into some of the paedophile networks that run in the US, which Disney was involved in. So a few years back there was a story about some of the high-ranking officials from Disney trafficking children. That all went, you know, quiet. You know, we sort of heard about it in the mainstream news, but the way they tried to portray it is, it's just a few rogue employees. They also have a lot of influence and sway over the minds of young people growing up, because if you get people while they're young, then you know you're going to have them for life. So these companies play a very, very key role in controlling a lot of what we hear. Then you've got companies like Viacom, News Corp, you've got Murdoch, NBC. I mean, I'm only naming a few of these. But then you also have Barclays Bank, Johnston Press in the UK. They own quite a few newspapers as well. So the vast majority of these companies own at least 50, I say 50 newspapers each, that's not really accurate. I would say 50 media outlets each. So what do I mean by the media? Traditionally, especially when I was growing up, before I became part of the media, I just thought of it as newspapers, TV and media, where we get our main news from. When I say news, I'm not so much talking about entertainment, I'm talking about, you know, sort of current affairs and things like that. But then the line between current affairs and real news and entertainment is getting much, much smaller. Because now what you're reading in even some of the broadsheets is basically, you know, stuff about Kim Kardashian and Love Island and all this crap that we really need to know about because it affects our lives so deeply. I also incorporate into this talk, you know, tech giants such as Facebook, that also owns WhatsApp and Instagram and a bunch of other companies as well. Google, which controls whether we get to see these news outlets in the first place. Movies and ads. So when I make reference to the media throughout this talk, those are the companies that I'm referring to. So what is their purpose? Excuse me, I've got this cough that I just can't seem to shake. So what is their purpose? Distraction is the most obvious tool that they're using. If we're so overwhelmed with trivial news that does not affect us, it's hard to get to the heart of what's really happening. So examples of distraction include celebrity news, the royal wedding, TV shows or news about cute cats or pranks, just stuff that we don't really need to know about. The most recent example is the widespread attention given to the World Cup. Now, I have absolutely nothing against football, But what I find interesting is the widespread coverage that it gets in almost all of the news outlets. It's all you hear about, or all you heard about for the last few weeks, especially the build up to it. And I just can't help feeling that that's a distraction. It's, that goes back to the old bread and circuses, getting us to focus on one thing whilst really other things are going on, or laws are being passed that we simply don't know about.